So Sam, tell me what's going on here. It sounds like Watch Dogs or Mr. Robot.
Right. It definitely is like Watch Dogs. We realized that when we found this vulnerability, we could actually build a tool that is exactly the same as the actual Watch Dogs tool in the game. So what actually happens in Watch Dogs is the character like walks up to a car, does whatever, and is able to like remotely unlock and start the car. And using this vulnerability, you can do the same thing, knowing only the victim's like license plate number.
Sam, this is crazy from a privacy point of view. If I understand this correctly, you guys can find any Kia car in the world, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, if you see a license plate of a Kia vehicle online of like some celebrity if an attacker were to exploit this, they could just type in that license plate number and find the exact location of that car and do it persistently. And the victim will never receive like a notification. They're not going to get an email like, hey, somebody's tracked your car. It's just like dead silence, and somebody can just keep tracking it over and over.
Your phone rings. The number displayed is someone that you know. When you answer the call, the voice sounds like one of your children or a family member or your boss, and they're asking you to urgently send money. But is that actually the person you think it is, or is it a scammer? Now, unfortunately, in today's world, with the rise of AI, of voice cloning, you can't trust that the voice that you're hearing is actually the person you think it is. This has been an ongoing issue for a long time, where your personal data is sold by data brokers online, freely available or available for a small cost for scammers, hackers, and companies to try and hack you or to just follow you online and violate your privacy. Rachel Toback, an ethical hacker who I highly respect, has done various demonstrations with CNN where she has phoned companies pretending to be one of the reporters, as an example, spoofing their telephone number, using voice software to sound like that person, and for instance, to change bookings or steal airline points. She's also used voice cloning to phone an assistant, pretending to be a boss, getting them to do something that they shouldn't have done. Those were fantastic demonstrations of a real-world problem. This is happening all the time. You need to make sure that your data is removed from the internet. You can either do that manually, which is a really difficult task, or you can use a service such as DeleteMe, which I'm using because of the recommendations of Rachel Toback and others that I respect in the cybersecurity industry. Don't believe that this will never happen to you. In the US alone, in 2024, there were over 1 million reports of identity theft. So, scammers are trying to scam you. Hackers are trying to hack you. They're trying to steal your identity. They're trying to get access to your money. They're trying to get access to your bank accounts. They can find your personal data. They can find your name. They can find your telephone number. They can find your address. They can find a whole bunch of other information about you, including really confidential information such as your social security number if you're based in the US. Unfortunately, even your passwords are out there because of data breaches that take place. I personally use DeleteMe because of the recommendations of Rachel Toback and others. What's fantastic about their service is it's a hands-off subscription service. Your personal data is continuously monitored and removed from the internet. You could manually go and ask Google to remove your data from their search results. That is a lot of work. It's much easier and more convenient to have DeleteMe go and do that than you continuously try and monitor the internet and remove your data. The choice is yours, however. Now, if you want to join DeleteMe and get your personal data removed from the internet, use the link joindeleteme.com/Bomble and get a 20% discount. One other thing to remember is it doesn't just apply to you personally, it also applies to your family members. You can pay for a family subscription service that protects you and your family. Now, this doesn't just apply to the US. DeleteMe has offerings for other parts of the world. Once again, use my link below to sign up. I really want to thank DeleteMe for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel, as well as protecting me and my family by removing my personal data from the internet. Hey everyone, it's David Bomble back with the amazing Sam Curry. Sam, great to have you here.
Oh yeah, great to be here.
So Sam, you guys have been up to some, shenanigans maybe, or something. So perhaps you can tell us about this newest car hacking piece that you put out.
Sure. So the short of it is we built an app that lets you type in a license plate of any Kia and just unlock and start the car. You can also locate it and track it. But Kia's since patched this vulnerability, and we only built the tool as a proof of concept.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say that, right? Because you guys are ethical hackers. You could have sold this on the black market for probably quite a lot of money, but you're doing this ethically.
Yeah, we're doing it ethically to report it and make the kind of car ecosystem a little bit safer. So we kind of had some fun with this one to make the disclosure process a bit better.
Yeah, so just so that people understand, you've got this app on your phone, and through that app, you're sending some kind of commands to the cloud or an API or something, and that gives you full control over the vehicle just with the number plate. Is that kind of right?
Right. We built an app that leverages a vulnerability in Kia that affects the dealer portal. where an attacker can basically type in a VIN number, which you can derive from the license plate, and then execute commands like unlock, locate, or start.
So, I mean, it's scary from the point of view that if I had your number plate, I could find where you are. So from a stalking point of view, that's also insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of terrifying because like road rage from a threat perspective and like is actually kind of a scary thing, right? Like the number of friends I have who have like people who followed them home or like tried to like run into them in traffic is kind of crazy. But when you add this element into it where it's like somebody can just type in your license plate number, find you, track you, and basically see, you know, where you live and unlock your car, it's a little scary.
I mean, we had an interview, which I'll link below, where you guys hacked like 15 million cars or something crazy, all kinds of brands, Ferrari, BMW, Mercedes, I mean, a whole bunch of them. But this attack was specifically on Kia. So any Kia vehicle or car is susceptible to this. Is that correct?
Pretty much every Kia vehicle made after 2013. And the cool part about this attack is it doesn't require that the victim is paying for any sort of subscription. So as long as you have that remote connected hardware in your vehicle, we can actually activate that hardware and then perform the attack on your behalf without you really knowing about it.
Yeah, because when I was reading your notes, so just for everyone who's watching, I've put a link to Sam's blog below where this is explained in a lot of detail. You, just by getting the license plate number, for different vehicles, right? It's you could find it, so geolocate it. You can remotely unlock it, lock it, remote start, put the lights on. Is that correct? And honk the horn.
Yep.
You could also turn the camera on, right?
Yeah. So for the vehicles that had it enabled, they had like these 360-degree cameras. We could actually go ahead and view those like live cameras from wherever they're at. So it allows you to like take pictures of like a full 360 degrees around the car. So for like, you know, I think models past like 2018 or 2019 that had that specific trim, we could do that.
So from a privacy point of view, it's a nightmare because you could locate the vehicle without any additional subscription. Is that right?
Right.
You can remotely control the car. So you could literally just walk up to a car like you showed in your video, unlock the doors, turn it on and drive away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of interesting because it's not a fake video. Like that is a real video of a car we rented that we had no association with.
So all you did was rent the car. They obviously put your name on the registration, et cetera, but just by getting the license plate, you had total control.
Right. And you could do this with like pretty much any Kia. We tested it on our friends' cars. The journalist who covered the story, Andy Greenberg, to actually validate that this was possible, he, I think, tweeted and found a random one of his followers to come out and just show his Kia to us. And then we typed in the license plate and did the same thing to him.
Sam, last time we spoke, you were talking about how you guys target like cloud-based infrastructure or centralized infrastructure. And that means that unlike a flipper zero, you can just like perhaps replay, do a replay attack against a single car. Yeah, you're attacking millions of them. So can you kind of explain in a bit more detail how that works? Because obviously there's an app on your phone, but like what's happening in the background?
Sure. Yeah. So very straightforward. When you actually type in the license plate of the victim vehicle, there's a third-party database, which is basically a publicly accessible conversion between like license plate to VIN number. So we'll go ahead and convert the license plate to the VIN number. And then once you have that VIN number indexed, you can actually use that VIN number in the cloud-based systems to exploit vulnerabilities. So what we did is we found vulnerabilities that allowed you to basically completely take over a victim's account or vehicle. And you pass the VIN number then to those vulnerable APIs. And at that point, you become the owner of the vehicle. And all this happens without the victim ever knowing. There's no email that's sent to the victim that notifies them that we've added ourselves to their account. And then once we're in their account and can access their vehicle, we can go and execute commands on that vehicle. So for instance, like you could track a car, go to it, unlock it, and then start it. You can also like unlock the trunk, take photos from the 360-degree cameras, things like that.
Because you guys did something interesting, right? You didn't attack like the central portal. You found like a separate website. And perhaps you can just tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So we actually targeted the dealer infrastructure. We found a lot of vulnerabilities in the past on like other automakers, but we tend to focus on the user, front end for like customers, right?
Yeah.
But this time we focused on like the actual dealer side of things, which surprisingly you expect to be behind VPN, actually hard to get to, but anybody on the planet could like load these websites and then find vulnerabilities in them.
So you found a dealer website that was just open on the web, and then if I understood your write-up correctly, and you go deep in the technical stuff. So unlike like perhaps a normal journalist, give us the nitty gritty. You found that you could get a token and create like a dealer account or something, right?
Yeah. So basically, what we found is that when they built the dealer infrastructure and the customer infrastructure, they were actually parallel. It was like the same sort of APIs. So what we did is we just copied the request from the user's API and we use it on that dealer infrastructure. And we were able to actually like register for a dealer account ourselves. And then from that point, we can make a token and then dig through all the JavaScript on the dealer portal to find those API calls. And then we can call those API calls using our authorization token.
Sam, you've obviously got this blog. Perhaps you can like show us exactly what's going on. And, you know, for the technical people in the audience, you know, don't be shy. Give us the details of like the API calls and, you know, the JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. Go deep, man.
Yeah, sure. So Kia's infrastructure is really, really interesting. There's kind of this like front end reverse proxy to this back end API, which runs everything. And we were able to actually find the Kia dealer front end to back end API. And there's this like HTTP request where if you copy the normal HTTP request where you register as like a customer, like a normal Kia vehicle, you can actually register to the dealer portal. And then from that dealer portal, if we scroll down, there's these API endpoints where you pass in this header called API URL, and you can, you know, index specific API calls to do certain things with the vehicles. So the second API call, what it'll do is from that VIN number, it will retrieve the victim's name, email, phone number, physical address, and then you can actually like see who you're targeting, right? So not only is this like a security issue from like a physical take over the car perspective, but also from like a privacy perspective, right? If we go back to the scenario where it's like somebody cuts you off, you can, you know, obviously like pull their address and stuff. So the third step here is we actually modify the owner's permission of the vehicle. So like, let's say that the car was being utilized through the remote connected app and that there was like an active subscription. We can actually modify the owner's permission where we can invite ourselves and then become the primary owner and basically demote them as a secondary owner. And then when that happens, they're never notified that we're accessing their account. And we can also like become, you know, access those additional permissions to execute commands. Yeah. And then the last thing we can do is just like add ourselves to the vehicle. So after we modify the victim's permissions for their vehicle, we can add ourselves now as the primary owner and then execute those commands. And then lastly, what we'll do, and it's not documented the actual HTTP request in the blog post, but there's all the different commands you can send to the car.
Yeah, I can understand that you guys are hiding that, but from your app, it's going to the dealer portal or somewhere in the Kia infrastructure, right? And then just making API calls and then sending that down to the car and then getting the car to do things like open up.
Yep, exactly.
I think last time we spoke about this, I had the same reaction, right? This is insane. They want, you know, the government or whatever wants all cars connected. But like guys like you are showing like huge vulnerabilities from security point of view, but also privacy point of view.
Yeah, 100%. So it's really, really fascinating from like actual security and privacy perspective, because it's like, say the vulnerability is patched. Like this is a one-off vulnerability that we found and reported that they'll put a software update, and the infrastructure will still exist for like Kia dealers, for Kia employees to be able to modify this. And at the backend level, there's still going to be those internal APIs. And it's interesting because it's on behalf of Kia, the organization, right? It's not like a dealership has these APIs. They have access to them, but they don't run them, right? There is that centralized point, which is Kia, which has access to all these internal APIs, which can do all these things. So yeah, it's really interesting from a privacy and security perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of privacy conscious people, it only takes one subpoena from the government to like say, where's your car? Where are you?
Yep. And like, it definitely happens, right? Like they definitely store like your location, and like it is there in the app, right? Unless you physically disable these SIMs, they are sending data out.
Yeah, I mean, there was a case in the UK where someone was murdered on a farm and they managed to find the person, even though they had burnt their vehicle, by going through the history of the logs of where the car had been.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, and if you're going to like murder somebody, I assume you try to think about stuff like that. So it's really interesting. Even like somebody who's like calculated or done a murder, like isn't thinking of these things, which is kind of crazy to me. So like most people I don't think would think that unless they're paying a subscription, you know, they're not getting those connected services. But in the reality is they're still existing.
Yeah, I mean, because all the cars are connected. And I mean, when you did the last hack, you were talking about Jasper, right? That allowed, just talk about what that is again for people who didn't watch the previous video.
Sure. Yeah. So Jasper is really interesting because if you're Kia and you want to buy like 1 million SIM cards that you're going to put in your vehicle, they all get managed through this centralized system called Jasper. And Jasper is like this multi-tenant telco system, which allows like the tenant Kia to actually manage those SIM cards, right? And through, you know, like normal telecommunication functionality, you can actually like triangulate where the SIM cards are. So if the SIM card's plugged into a, you know, any sort of device, for instance, this time like a car, the actual provider, that telco Jasper system, but basically what you do is triangulate your location.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's Cisco Jasper now, right? So the there's a centralized device or system that has all this information about all these cars and wherever they are at any given time. So I mean, from a law enforcement point of view, it's obviously fantastic because like this murderer was caught because of the location of the car. They could prove that he had been there. But from a privacy point of view, as a normal citizen, not doing anything wrong, it's a worry, right?
It's definitely a worry. And there's been cases too in the US where like a police officer or somebody working for the DMV will actually find a victim's address and then like, you know, murder or like go to their house and things like that. And it's been really bad. So the fact that like, you know, someone like me can go and like find a vulnerability like this, which allows you to access that, it kind of begs the question, like, are other people going and finding these issues and like, are they being exploited to target, for instance, like specific individuals?
I'm glad you mentioned that because, I mean, I don't want to downplay you guys because you guys are rock stars in this field. There's like 4 or 5 of you, is that right, as a team?
Yep. So to just say, you know, this research was done by me, Nico Rivera, Ian Carroll, and Justin Reinhart.
So, I mean, you guys, 4 rock stars doing this, but like nation states or, you know, well-paid groups, for lack of a better term, they are also looking at these things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from like an intelligence perspective and like a nation state perspective, it's a really fun idea to like, you know, if you're tracking a country or tracking people in a country, to actually have like what is essentially like long-standing tracking of like where they are and where they're going. I think it, you know, sheds a lot of light for like these kind of like secondary attacks, you know, who's visiting who, like, you know, things like that, like some nice social graphs.
Yeah, I mean, so from a privacy point of view, we're getting tracked on our cars. And so I think from my point of view, I need to buy classic cars, what I said last time, and I think I should really look at that, right? Not that I've got anything to hide, but from a privacy point of view, you don't want to be tracked 24/7, but your phones and other devices are also tracking you. So from a car point of view, it's a nightmare. But you guys also did work with Apple, right? You also hacked Apple.
Yeah, we found vulnerabilities where like you could essentially query any user and pull their, you know, name, billing information, physical address, purchases, and just like all the general stuff on your Apple account. We also found vulnerabilities that would allow you to like leak and enumerate people's iCloud photos.
Yeah, so you could look at people's photos stored in the cloud.
Yeah, there was a vulnerability which allowed you basically, by sending a malicious email that you open on your iPhone, it would basically leak to us your photos. So it took advantage of a vulnerability in the actual like Apple mail client. So where when you open it, a payload executes and then it pulls all your photos from iCloud and sends it over to us.
So Sam, I'm a bit slow with these things. How did you get the number plate to VIN? And I mean, I'm not sure if you shared that on your blog, but you know, how does that connection work?
Yeah, sure. So this is something I learned about recently in like the last year. I didn't know it was possible originally, but somebody told me that the DMV in the United States actually sells this data to a few companies.
Wow.
Or they like have a relationship and give it away. But those companies with this data, I think they realize that there's a market for it. So those companies actually built out APIs for, you know, normal businesses and like law enforcement to use. So anybody like myself can just go and register to these APIs, and then it costs like, you know, 1 or 2 cents per query to actually convert somebody's license plate to a VIN number. So yeah, from like an attacker's perspective, it's really, really interesting because most of the connected car vulnerabilities will index the vehicle by the VIN number. So when you can just, you know, find a photo of a celebrity getting into their car, take the license plate, turn it into a VIN number, and then just like basically hack them, right? It becomes like a more accessible kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy because I mean, like you just said there, if I see a photo of some person, some celeb that I want to know about, all I need is their number plate. I pay a few cents, get their VIN number, and then I can locate them. That's insane.
Yeah, it's definitely like kind of freaky. And like there's a lot of like other information you can retrieve. So there's like a lot of like billing information about like your SiriusXM connection and like these different APIs that just leak tons of information. And like there's so many that like haven't been fixed or are still being fixed that like it's kind of scary because it's just like, you know, you can derive so much from somebody.
And that's on the DMV side, right? That's not specific to Kia. This is just general.
Yep. So in the United States, it's pretty much like every vehicle. If you have a license plate, you can derive it to the actual make and model of the car. They have like an ongoing relationship. So it's not sparse. They have like everybody's data in every state and can do this for anywhere.
So, okay. So just walk me through it again because I'm slow. You get the number plate from this rental that you showed in the video. You go to this API from the DMV or this data broker, whatever. You get the VIN number. So you get the association from number plate to VIN number. Then you went to the dealer site and you could, by creating this fake, you became basically a Kia dealer, right? And that's how, and then you tied that in the VIN number into the dealer site to get the details of the car. Did I say that right?
Yeah, basically there's a lot of like vulnerabilities kind of in the middle part there, but yeah. The process is going to be license plate to VIN number to exploit on the dealer portal to physically being able to access that car.
Yeah, it's mad because it sounds like, okay, it's one hack, but it sounds like there's a whole bunch of things that you guys had to do to actually get this to work.
Yeah, so the actual idea behind building the app is like, when we did the car research a long time ago, I always had the idea, it's like, to actually really get like the public understanding of like what is possible, you kind of need to build the Mr. Robot type proof of concept, right? So the idea for like the Kia tool or like an app that lets you type in a license plate and get the VIN number, that's like a really big process for us, because once you have that VIN number, every single car company has like different types of vulnerabilities with that VIN number, right? So you can basically load in as many exploits as you want into this tool, and then you'll have like kind of this universal tool to like either unlock, locate, or dox somebody from their license plate number.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you're obviously not giving all the information on your blog, and understandably so. What's worrying is, okay, so this is Kia, they fixed it, but I'm hoping you've already got other car manufacturers in your sites, and you're going to go and see what they're doing.
Yeah, like we want to look at car manufacturers a little bit more. It's kind of tricky because it's like we've been on the car hacking beat for like a few years now, so it's like we may want to like move on a little bit to something new, but like we think this proof of concept does enough to like demonstrate like, hey, like this is a really big deal from like an attacker's perspective, because it's like, car theft is very rampant in the United States, and it's like you could sell this to criminals very easily, and it's just like, instead of having to smash windows, it's just car, hack it, unlock it, leave, and everything's gonna look normal until people come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway whenever I talk to you is, unlike these other car theft gadgets, if you like, Flipper Zeros was made a big thing of in Canada, and they seem to have like misunderstood the limitations of the Flipper Zero. But I mean, that's one car. These guys have these tools where they can unlock a specific car, but you could unlock any car that you wanted to.
Yeah, so any Kia vehicle pretty much made after 2013, at minimum you could do is track and unlock it. A lot of them had like extra features, again, like viewing with cameras or things like that. But yeah, pretty much it is wild, because it's like I'll be driving, right? And I'll see a Kia, and it's like I could hack that. And then another Kia, and it's like I could hack that. And it's just over and over. It's just every car basically.
So tell me, you could unlock the car, you could get in, start it, and drive away. You didn't have to do anything else. Just with that app on your phone, you could do all of that and just literally take the car.
Yeah, so you actually have to pair it with some specific vulnerabilities. So for instance, there's like key fob vulnerabilities you'd have to use, or you'd have to actually bypass it using just like a normal thing. The app itself won't allow you to drive it away. But yeah, like with Kia, like there's a lot of secondary issues, obviously, with like starting the vehicle. So it's not a long shot to do that, but it does require a little bit more.
So, I mean, a lot of the audience watching are very technical and into cybersecurity, but what was the reaction from the Wired journalist and like the less technical people?
Yeah, so when we actually demonstrated the vulnerability to the Wired journalist, Andy Greenberg, he was really shocked, because what he'd done is he asked his followers, said, hey, does anybody own a Kia? And if so, come out to like Denver, Colorado, and we want to test something. And we got this group chat together, and the dude in the group chat, I asked him if he could just like share his license plate. And then he shared his license plate, and then like 15 seconds later, he's like, hey, my car is honking, And Andy's like, this is the craziest POC I've ever seen, because it's just very, very, very straightforward, right? So then we eventually like flew out all to Denver, and all of us were in this parking lot. And, the guy drives up in his Kia, and it's like a very quick thing where on a laptop or on a phone, we're just very able to quickly take over his car, track it, unlock it, start it.
I mean, what I love about it, right, is it's exactly that. You guys have taken this really technical thing, like this hack or a bunch of hacks. I mean, you've been showing me like the code, and people who are technical understand that. But to actually make it real for a normal person in the street, that app just, really seals the deal.
Right. It's really interesting too, from like a security perspective, because like sharing these things often, like you'll get all these security companies will share these crazy blog posts about these vulnerabilities. But when you actually read the story, you realize it's not exploitable unless there's like these preconditions met. But with this vulnerability, it affected pretty much every Kia made after 2013. And, if your friend owned a Kia and they're not paying for the subscription, we could still hack them. If it's an older Kia from like 2015 and it doesn't have much features, like we could still hack it. Like pretty much every Kia after 2013.
I saw you shared in your blog, there was a link to someone testifying in Congress about what you guys got up to.
Yeah, definitely. So that was Paul Roberts, and he actually testified, I think, on a Senate hearing on like vehicle security. And it was really cool because we actually, for a different vulnerability, for like a TSA vulnerability, we got to go out and like sit in the Senate hearing. So it's really cool to see, because I think with the vehicle hacking, US government is like taking it very seriously from like a privacy and security perspective, because, more and more the US seems to be shifting towards, companies themselves should be responsible for software vulnerabilities. And, having hearings like that to like really kind of hammer the idea, like, if you guys keep messing up, like we're going to have to change something.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how the world is moving so quickly ahead, right? With IoT, connected cars, but security is an afterthought.
The car ecosystem is really interesting because like there's so much similar between every vehicle. So like for vehicles to stand out, they really have to go the extra mile to like push the extra feature, And when Tesla came out and like basically kind of spearheaded a lot of like the connected vehicle stuff with like, hey, you can control your car with your phone. The other automakers, like I feel like felt like they had to catch up, and they're pushing out these changes and like these new configurations and new things like 360-degree cameras without considering like a lot of the security implications. And for researchers to like come in and like you can demonstrate that these are vulnerable systems and that you can exploit them, it's like a really kind of scary thing.
I think the more you learn about cybersecurity, the more paranoid you become, and rightly so, especially when I talk to experts like you and other people, right? It makes me like think I really want to disconnect my life, because the world is moving to be more and more connected, but security is lagging behind.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And there's like a really funny quote. A friend of mine shared that a friend of his who had like worked at Tesla, he was talking to him and they're like, oh, what kind of Tesla do you drive? And he was like, oh, I drive like a 2016 Tesla. And then the Tesla employee was like, oh my God, I wouldn't get in a 2016 Tesla. And like, you have to think about that from like a security privacy, because someone internal at Tesla is like, oh my God, like I understand, like that's not safe. So like, what is really going on like behind the scenes? Is there like a lot of, mitigate, or people just kind of skipping security and like pushing out changes and knowing that like these systems are vulnerable? It's really kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, and what you've said is like Tesla have pushed the limits of this with connected cars, making our lives easier. Perhaps like you walk up to the car, the door unlocks, all that kind of stuff. Starting the car with your phone. And the other manufacturers are playing catch up, it feels sometimes. But, they rushing these features out the door without thinking about security implications.
Right. And I'd be like kind of terrified. So like Tesla implemented a thing called summon mode, right? And summon mode is literally you signing into your account on the app. And from like anywhere in the world, it does like a location check, like a proximity check on your iPhone location to a car location, but you can bypass that, right? And from anywhere in the world, you send that remote command and it will like actually move the car, right? And this is accessible to like all consumers, but it's kind of a wild thing to say like, oh, if somebody hacks your Tesla account, they can, instead of like even, honking your horn or whatever, it's like they can physically move your car, right? So for other auto manufacturers like Kia or Hyundai or whoever, if they wanted to like copy Tesla and push this out, I don't know if I would trust like the security of that kind of implementation.
Sam, you had this part of your blog where you say taking over vehicles, and you're showing like attacker, Kia backend, the victim vehicle, and you're showing these different messages. Could you just talk us through like sort of the logic of what's going on?
Yeah. So with this diagram, the first step's kind of cool because it's like the actual vulnerability. So when we actually generate that dealer token, we're using that vulnerability we found to actually create that dealer account. But once we generate that dealer token, we'll retrieve the victim's like name, email, phone number, all that. And then after we know who the victim is, we can actually go ahead and like modify their account. And after we modify their account, the final thing we're going to do is add ourselves to the account as the primary owner. And the cool thing too is like the victim is never notified. There's no email, like there's been changes made to your account. It just happens, right? And finally, after we've done all that, we can actually send those commands to the vehicle.
Because in your app, I saw you have two parts to it, garage and then something else. Is that right?
Yeah. So I made the decision to add like a garage page to our app because like, let's say you hacked a vehicle and then you like the next day you came back to it. You'll actually keep that vehicle in your account that you can still like send those commands to. So the actual exploit takes around 30 seconds, but the actual commands take like 4 or 5 seconds. So once that vehicle has been initially compromised, you can just go to the garage at any time and then find the vehicle you want to send commands to and click the commands.
So you had the garage part. That's where you're doing stuff with a car, correct? And then your exploit is the actual hack. Did I understand that right?
Yep. The exploit page is going to be the actual hack. So all of like the back end, like stuff you're not seeing takes place once you actually click exploit. So it sends about probably like 7 or 8 HTTP requests and it'll give you like logs of what's going on. So for every step in that exploit process, you get like a message in your error log or your console. And then once the car has been successfully exploited, you can just click garage and it'll show up on garage as a victim's vehicle that you've taken over. And then from there, you can actually click to execute commands.
Now, you've mentioned this on multiple times, and I'm sure someone's thinking about it because I was like, okay, you keep mentioning HTTP, but I'm assuming it was encrypted. It wasn't clear text stuff.
Yeah, HTTPS, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Because I mean, it's like, is it that bad? Hopefully, Kia used encrypted stuff, but it's. I understand you're talking about HTTP response and requests, but it was encrypted. But I mean, it didn't really help in this case because you could just become a dealer.
Right, exactly. It didn't. It was encrypted, but yeah, just sadly vulnerable.
I was looking at the timeline, and it looked like you guys found it on. Okay, I got to look at the American. Date. So it's the 7th of June this year that you guys sent the message to Kia first, correct?
Yep.
And then you had to prompt them like multiple times about how serious this was.
Yeah, it took a while to communicate. And I don't really like to bash companies because like I think even just like fixing it and not really responding is still like a really good thing for them to do. But yeah, Kia was kind of like not super communicative. So like we had to prompt them a few times, and then even like when we intended to disclose it, we had to like prompt them a few times as well to like say, hey, we validate it's fixed, but we're going to wait the full 3 months because you're not being very responsive. So
yeah, I mean, it's a problem for security researchers. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time. What's your advice for someone who wants to get into car hacking or just into security research in whatever area it is? Because like, how do you pay yourself? How do companies pay you? What's your advice for the journey?
Yeah, so the journey is very interesting, right? Like, I always joke with my girlfriend that like, if security research didn't pay, then we'd be broke, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, but the whole thing with like doing work like this is like with car companies and companies like this, they can be a bit litigious. So like, kind of approaching it light-footed and understanding like the risks involved, like both like legally and from a security perspective of like making sure you're authorized to test and not overstepping any boundaries. But yeah, I think the big thing that I would say to people is like individual like hackers have so much power because like if you're a team, even if you're like a team of pen testers and you guys are like the elite team of pen testers, it's going to take you 2 weeks to set up an audit. You're going to have like a time box, like 80 hours to audit something. And then afterwards there's like a, write the full report. So like even just from a time perspective, right? If you're like this elite pen tester, you're on this like crazy schedule. You can't hack what you want. You're kind of stuck. But to add the second part of that, it's like, from an individual perspective, right? There are so many open security programs that you can pick pretty much anything and you can put like a dedicated effort and most of the time find really serious vulnerabilities. Like the way companies work and the way like everything works is like most of the time there are areas that are being neglected by organizations from a security perspective. And as an individual, if you can like kind of research that and from an outside perspective, just say like, hey, it looks like you guys didn't secure this portion and I found a vulnerability in it. It's a very like valuable an approachable thing for individuals.
So did you go via bug bounty, or is this part of a bug bounty program, or is it just like, okay, we decide one day we're going to start hacking Kia?
Yeah, so it's just for fun. It's part of a vulnerability disclosure program that doesn't pay money, but we do other bug bounty programs. Like I do work. I sold a company. Like I'm very like financially motivated, but at the same time, like this work is all passion projects, right? Like I very much enjoy kind of just like the fun hacking that has like funny goals at the end of it. Like one of the funny things for me too is like just the funny thought, like you're in a drive-thru at Starbucks, right? And say there's somebody in front of you, if you exploit this vulnerability, you could technically just type in their license plate and make their car honk, right?
Yeah.
And it's hilarious, right? Because it's like this person has no idea what's going on. Their car is honking. And then like you're sitting there and there's like who is going to assume the person behind you has hacked your car, like make it honk? It's really fun. So
yeah, I mean, I love what you're doing because you make it like a joke or a prank. But I mean, at the same time, you are closing serious vulnerabilities in cars or other systems like Apple, etc., and making the world a more secure place.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's very serious, and then there's very like whimsical kind of, and they kind of collide a little bit. So,
what would your advice be to someone who's starting? Is it like they're interested in this stuff? I mean, you've already shared your journey, and I'll put that video below again. But maybe, like in brief, you can tell us like any. A bit later now, in our interview from the previous one, what's your advice for someone getting started?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece of advice I'd say is like, just have fun with it. Like, you don't have to be studying these like really long courses or reading all these books. Like, just kind of find something you like. Maybe if you're part of like a tennis club or something, there's a tennis club website. Like, it's really silly, but it's like, if you could report a vulnerability there and like, it'd be fun for you, then why not? Like, obviously, test with permission, blah, blah, blah. But like, try to stay focused on things you actually enjoy.
Sam, I really want to thank you for sharing and inspiring people. I think it's so important that all of us see people like you in the industry doing this. I mean, you're not a boomer, you're someone younger, you've done a whole bunch already in your life, and it's fantastic to see you inspiring people, but also inspiring people to go on the right path. So thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Happy to be here.